everyone, welcome back to the channel. I'm Nisan and today I'm showing you how to sew a bandless collar. You'll find this beautiful detail on our crew pattern of the month for August, the Edith shirt dress. It's a type of collar that lays flat against the neck without a band or a collar stand underneath to support it up. I'll show you a couple examples of different shirt patterns to show you what I mean. So here I have the Jenna shirt. You can see that the collar is sandwiched between two collar stands, like so. Whereas on the Edith shirt dress, there is no separate band or collar stand. The collar is sewn directly to the bodice of the shirt dress. You'll often find this detail on vintage casual shirts, think like camp color shirts, really beautiful sort of convertible colors. They often feature this detail. You won't find a band or a color stand separate from the collar piece. So it's really versatile, but what happens is you'll often find this detail on shirts that have either a back yoke or a front facing or a back facing or any combination of those details. So it's usually sandwiched between a facing or a yoke and the outer bodice. On the Edith shirt dress, we wanted to keep the finishing really vintage inspired and sort of simple and clean. So there's just a folded button placket and then no front or back facing. The collar is sandwiching the neckline of the shirt, which can be slightly trickier to wrap your head around, but I'll walk you through it. It's a super simple technique, so you'll be able to make your own beautiful Edith shirt dress or any other camp color shirt that features a similar detail. Okay, so the first step is to prepare the center front and the neckline edge of your front bodice as well as the back one, but we'll start with the front. So I have my pattern piece cut out from my main fabric. I applied a 1-inch strip of fusible interfacing between the first and second notches from the center front. So it's this first notch and the second notch all the way down the center front of the shirt. And then I pressed in the center front edge in by 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch, like so. Next, you'll fold again, this time along the edge of the interfacing, so 1 inch. And press again. This is all towards the wrong side of the fabric. Next, we'll undo the second fold we've just created. So now the fabric is right sides together. And I'll put a small pin right here. On the pattern piece, you'll see that there are 2 circles along the neckline. One right here and the second one here. We placed these 2 circles there so that you would be able to see your circle mark regardless of which side of the project you're working from. So here you can see the circle, and on the other side there's a matching one. For this first step, we'll start from this folded edge and sew up to the circle, stopping precisely at the circle and backstitching. For all the seams around the neckline and the collar, we'll be using a 3/8 seam allowance, so 1 centimeter. Backstitching at the back, beginning. Stopping precisely at the circle. So here's a close-up of that first little seam we've just sewn. It's from the folded edge up to the circle. Next, we'll snip into the seam allowance of the neckline, stopping precisely at the circle again, like so. So there's a small little slit right there. Because we're working with a near 90-degree angle here, I actually like to keep my seam allowances intact so I don't trim off the corner. If you prefer to do so, sure, go ahead. But I like to fold the edge, fold the little corner, grab onto it with my finger, and just fold it out. I then gently poke it out. And it gives me a really sharp little corner. Press into place. So you can see that there's a small step that we've just created. We'll be sewing the collar to the remaining part of the seam allowance, and the center front edge is nicely finished. The next step is to edge stitch the bottom placket in place. From this step onwards, you'll just finish the rest of your construction seams around the neckline. So that means sewing the darts at the back of the shoulders, sewing the shoulder seams, finishing them, pressing them towards the back, which will give you a complete neckline onto which you can sew the collar. I have an example here that I prepared earlier so you can see. We have the little step at the center front edge and then the complete neckline. It's also a good idea to sew a line of stay stitching 6 millimeters or 1/4 of an inch away from the raw edge of the neckline so that your neckline doesn't stretch out of place, and it's also going to be helpful for the next step, which is sewing the collar onto the shirt. So our next step is preparing the collar so that we can assemble everything together in the final step. For this, it's really simple. You'll just need your top collar piece, which is the one that I've interfaced, your under collar, and you'll press the neckline edge of your under collar in by 1 centimeter or 3/8 of an inch. Next, you'll align the two collars along the remaining 3 edges and sew, pivoting at the corner circles. I graded my under collar seam so that when I turn it inside out, it blends and creates a smoother edge. Again, because I'm working with 90-degree or slightly wider angles here at the corners, I like to keep my corners in and fold them away so that they actually help to support the corners of the collar. Another really neat trick I like to use when I'm sewing really sharp corners is trapping a piece of thread inside the stitching of the corner. So when you're one stitch away from turning the corner, you place a piece of thread, you stitch over the piece of thread and pull it towards one side and continue as normal. That allows you to have these two little pull tags essentially for creating a really sharp corner after you've turned it inside out. So I'll give you a little demonstration, and we also have a really detailed tutorial up on our blog, which we'll link in the description below. So after I've turned my corner, I'll just pull on the threads, and you can see that it creates a really sharp, beautiful 90-degree angle corner effortlessly. So again, on this side, I'm just folding in my corner. You can also trim it. If you're using the thread technique, it's going to produce a quite similar effect. I turn it inside out and then grab onto the threads, give them a pull, and it pulls the very tip of the corner out so that it looks really sharp. And you can remove your threads. We'll just give our collar a nice press. Because the under collar is cut smaller than the top collar, it's gonna encourage the top collar to roll over to the wrong side, so towards the under collar. So after you've turned your collar to the right side, you'll just give it a really nice press, encouraging the top collar to roll over towards the under collar. Make sure that the folded edge on the side of the neckline remains folded in. There we go. That's the next step done. Our collar is prepared. The final step is just to join the collar to the rest of the bodice. You'll start by putting the right side of the top collar to the wrong side of the shirt or the shirt dress, matching notches and seams. When you reach the center front edge, make sure that the folded edge of your collar matches up perfectly with the small step we've created. Like so. If you find it tricky to match the relatively straight edge of the collar to the curved edge of the neckline, you can also cut small snips into the neckline edge of your bodice up to the stay stitching line, which will allow it to lay a bit more flat, and it will be easier for you to match the collar to the neckline. There we go. So right now, the right side of the top collar is touching the wrong side of my shirt dress. We'll be sewing the seam using a 3/8 of an inch or 1 centimeter seam allowance, backstitching at both the beginning and the end. As you're sewing, make sure that there are no puckers or folds on the side of your bodice. Now that we have the collar sewn to the bodice, we'll just need to clip into the seam to release some of the tension. Next, we'll press the seam allowance up towards the collar. The reason why we've sewn the top collar to the wrong side of the shirt rather than doing the inverse is so that the hand-sewn portion of the seam lands underneath the collar. This side is less likely to be seen on the outside because the collar will fold over like so and cover your hand-sewn seam. But if you are planning on wearing your shirt with the collar popped more often than not, I would maybe recommend doing the inverse. So in that case, you would be sewing the under collar to the right side of the shirt and then stitching the inside seam by hand. Next, we'll use the folded edge we've pressed at the first step to slightly cover the stitching line we've just created. So you want the fold to ever so slightly cover your line of stitching. We'll pin that into place. Because we'll be hand sewing the seam, I really like hand basting it first, because it's really annoying to get your thread caught up in the pins as you're doing a more intricate hand stitching. Using a contrasting thread color, I will baste the seam I just pinned into place. It's all hand basted into place, which will make it super easy to hand sew it in this final step. And before I start sewing, I will just quickly run my thread through some beeswax a couple times. And I'll use the iron to melt the wax onto the thread. This will help condition and strengthen your thread, as well as avoid any tangles. And it really makes the hand sewing process much more enjoyable and tolerable if you're not into it. I'll create a simple knot at one end of the thread. I like using a single strand, but you can also use your thread folded over, so that it's double the thickness, like so. And then starting at one edge, I will anchor my thread on the side of the neckline. And just take a couple stitches in the same place to make sure it's properly anchored. Because I'm right-handed, I will be working from right to left, but if you're a lefty, feel free to reverse my directions. We'll be using a very simple slip stitch to sew the undercollar to the right side of the bodice. Again, I'm taking a small bite of the fabric parallel to the folded edge of the collar. Pulling it tight. And then taking another bite, this time from the side of the neckline, right along the original line of stitching. From the collar and from the neckline. You'll continue repeating these two steps, alternating between the collar and the neckline, until you reach the other edge of your collar. When you're done, you're just gonna fold your collar to the right side of your garment. And it's all done. It should look something like this. Alright, I hope you found this tutorial helpful. If you have any questions, feel free to leave them in the comments and I'll get right back to you. We have new videos coming out every week, so subscribe and see you in the next one. Bye!